So, what do you say when you're in a conversation with somebody and you find out that they have been so belittled at work that they're now traumatized to the point that having left work months ago, they still can't sleep? Not just as a one-off, but night after night, they cannot sleep because of what they've been through and the trauma that entails. What do you say when you find out that someone has been running a business for 17 years and they're having to shut the business down because a close family member has just had a stroke and they now need care? And so they're shutting the business so that they can care for a close family member. What do you say when you're in a conversation with somebody and you find out that they were married some years ago and they're still living every single day completely brokenhearted because that marriage didn't work, and the person that they love the most no longer wants to be a part of their life? What do you say in a situation like that? Those are 3 conversations that I've had with different people just in the last 3 weeks. What do you say? But more than that, what do you do? What do you do when you're in a situation like that where you feel overwhelmed, where you feel at sea, where you feel lost, where you are going through a trauma or where you've been through a trauma and you don't know how to get free from it? What do you say when you're living under this cloud of lowness and it doesn't matter what the weather's doing around you, it doesn't matter who you're with, you just can't shake it? What do you do when life deals you something that you would never have chosen yourself, something that you were never prepared for? And what do you do when that happens, and it happened not that long ago as well, so you haven't yet healed from the last time that something happened, and now you've got something else on your plate? How do you navigate that? Well, as a church, we're working our way through the gospel according to John. And this is what disciples of Jesus do. They devote themselves to the scriptures. And so we're coming to the end of that commitment that we made, that we were going to work from the beginning of John's gospel all the way through to the end. And we're just about today to start John 21. It's the last chapter in the book of John. And we're picking up the story at a moment where this is what Jesus' disciples are going through. They have just been traumatized. They have just been through a series of experiences that have left them confused, bewildered, anxious. They've been in fear of their lives, and they just don't know whether they're coming or going. And it's just all happened so quickly. So they have just seen the person that they held in highest regard, the person that they had the most love for, they saw him betrayed by one of their own. They saw him illegally convicted, and then they saw him tortured to death. And not just kind of having to process the fact that one of them was the instigator of all of that, but the fact that they had all promised Jesus, we will be with you to the very end, no matter what happens, and not one of them came close to keeping that promise. And so there's this moment that they've been through of fear of, well, if this is what they've done for Jesus, maybe our close association with Jesus means that we now are going to be targets. What if the guy who betrayed Jesus is also now going to betray us? And after all of that, then Jesus appears. He's risen from the dead, and they've seen Jesus now twice in 2 weeks, risen from the dead. And they're trying to process all of this. They're trying to work out, like, what does this mean? Because everything has changed. They have changed. They will never be the same people again. But what does it mean? How do they move forward having experienced all of this? And they're trying to process it all. And is Jesus here or is he not? Because he's appeared on 2 different occasions, but he doesn't seem to be hanging around. Like, what does this mean? How do we move forward? How do we get back on track? So we're going to read today, we're in John 21, we're going to read the first 14 verses. And I want to point out to you what Jesus does to help get his disciples back on track. How he reaches out to them. And then I want to point out to you 2 brilliant decisions that his disciples made. Okay, so we're in John 21, and we're going to read verses 1 through 14, and Kate is going to read for us today.
So John 21, verses 1 to 14. Jesus appears to 7 disciples. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the Twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat and you'll get some." So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water and headed to shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them: fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. "Bring some of the fish you've just caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't torn. "Now come and have some breakfast," Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the 3rd time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead.
Thank you. Okay, so we can probably get the feel of some of the confusion, some of the lostness that the disciples are feeling from what happened on that night out fishing. It didn't help by the fact that they didn't catch anything at all. So they've been out fishing all night. It wasn't like a group of mates, each with a rod and a line going in and some beers, sat on a boat, just, chatting with each other and enjoying a night out together. No, not at all. This was net fishing. And so it meant throwing a heavy net into the water and then pulling it up. So it was back-breaking work. And so they've been fishing all night, and then this random member of the public starts kind of shouting at them from the shore. Now, how many professional fishermen or good fishermen do you know appreciate advice from a random member of the public telling them that actually if they just moved what they were doing, it's like move it from here to here will make all the difference? We've got a fisherman sat there and he's like, no, we wouldn't take any advice like that. But for some reason, they decide, based on this random person, that they're going to pull this net in, so all the energy doing that, and then they're going to carry it across the boat and throw it in on the other side. And then it gets filled to the point of dangerously bursting. And it's at that point that they realize who it is that's speaking to them. And then Peter puts his pants on. Now, yes, he puts his pants on. You see, in those days, if you went fishing, you fished naked. And that's not why they fished at night, by the way. They fished at night because in the Sea of Galilee, that's when the fish came to the surface to feed. But everybody knows that it sucks to wear wet clothes, doesn't it? So if you're going to be pulling in a wet net all night, you're going to get absolutely soaked. And it's hot, sweaty work. So the easiest thing to do, take all your clothes off, put them in a dry bag. And so they were fishing all night long. But no one wants to meet Jesus with no pants on, do they? So they realize that it's Jesus on the shore. Peter's like rummaging through his dry bag. He puts his pants on, and then he hurls himself into the water. He doesn't dive. The word that is used there is literally just like throws himself into the water. He abandons the ship. He's the captain, by the way. He leaves everybody else in the dangerous situation, and he heads into shore. So, what I said to you is I wanted to point out to you what Jesus was doing to reach out to his disciples in this moment of lostness and confusion. So they have just been through a trauma. They will never be the same. You can't go back in time after what's happened. But Jesus reaches out to them, and it's the point at which they realize they've got a net full of fish that the penny drops for John. It's Jesus. Why? Because it had happened once before with that same group of fishermen. that they had followed Jesus' instructions of where to throw the net and ended up with so many fish that it nearly sank 2 boats. So now they've got so many fish that it's going to cause a problem for 1 boat. They're like, who do we know who does that kind of thing? It's Jesus. And there were 2 other occasions that we know of at least where Jesus fed people with fish McMuffin rolls. And both of those occasions were massive crowds of people. They were so big that they only bothered to count the men. So probably both crowds were in excess of 10,000 people. Jesus had just a few bread rolls and a couple fish, and he multiplied the food. And everybody got at least 1 fish McMuffin. Well, it says everybody ate to the point of being full. So some of the teenage boys probably had 3, 4 McMuffins, And so there was lots of food. And here Jesus is again with bread and fish feeding the disciples. And another thing about Jesus is that he was always seemed to be eating with people. Like meals, he loved to be with people around a table. And if you read through the Gospels again and again, it's like Jesus was at a meal here. Jesus was at a meal here. He said this round the table. This happened round a table. And so he invites the disciples to a meal. You see, what Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to get them to remember what it was that first made them give up everything to follow him. He's reminding them of that moment where they caught all the fish and then he said to them, "Follow me." And they did. And he's reminding them of the experiences they've had with him over the last 3 years, where they were part of that miracle, where the bread and the fish were multiplied. And he's reminding them, hey, I'm the fish McMuffin guy. Remember? We did that together. And he wants them to know that even though they're a mess, he wants to eat with them. And even though they messed up, he wants to eat with them. He's like reaching out to them and saying, hey, come on, it's okay. Let's be in this together. And this is what I want to point out to you, is that when you're in that moment of being overwhelmed, when life has dealt you something that you just don't know where to begin or how to move through or how to keep your head above water in a moment like that, the key is to remember that what you have with Jesus and what he has done with you over the years, your experiences with him, they don't change. You might change. Your circumstances might change. Other people might change. Life might go pear-shaped. But Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And every encounter that you have with him becomes this anchor point that you can go back to. And you can remember what he taught you in that moment and what he revealed to you in that moment. And that has things that you need for the present to help you to be able to navigate the present. And in moments like that, Jesus wants you to know that his invitation to you is, hey, if you're in a mess, let's do this together. If you've messed up, let's do this together. Come and be with me. Let's stay in fellowship. Let's not do this thing where you're not sure if I want to be your friend anymore, or you stay away because you feel shame. Let's not do any of that. Let's just reconnect. Now, I said I was also going to tell you about 2 brilliant decisions that the disciples made. So they'd been through this trauma, then they had 2 encounters with Jesus where they saw him after he'd been killed. He'd risen from the dead. Both those encounters were in Jerusalem. Now, Jesus had said to his disciples, before he was even arrested, he said, hey guys, some bad stuff is going to happen, but we will rendezvous in Galilee. And when the angels met the disciples at the tomb, they reminded the disciples of that, and they said, hey, remember, why are you guys here? You're looking for Jesus. He told you where he'd be. He said he would meet you in Galilee. So the first brilliant decision that the disciples made is to leave Jerusalem and go to Galilee. They did what Jesus told them to do. The second brilliant decision that they made is they stayed together. Well, 7 of them did. Matthew, little James, Simon the Zealot, and Thaddeus, they did their own thing. And because they didn't stay connected with the others, they missed out on fish breakfast. Completely. They weren't there. Only 7 of them. And so they weren't present at that moment of reconnection. So here's the point I want to make, and this is really important, is that Jesus goes after lost sheep so that he can bring them back into the flock. Jesus goes after lost people so that he can put them in a family. Jesus specifically chose individuals to be his disciples so that they could be part of a church. Jesus chose you so that you could be part of a body, his body. And so when you go through hard stuff, when you go through things that are difficult to process, when you feel lost, when you're at sea, when you feel a mess, one of the best things that you can do is to press into spending time with other believers. Often what people do is they disconnect. They stop coming to church. They stop going to home group. They stop hanging out with their church friends. And you can see what happened for Matthew and Simon and James, Thaddeus, for doing that, is they missed out. You see, Jesus never disconnects from his body. And so if when we give our lives to him, if when we belong to him, we become part of his body, he always stays connected to his body. So one of the best ways to reconnect with Jesus is to be part of his body, because he's always connected to it. And if you invest in and devote yourself to fellowship, this is why the Bible says don't give up meeting together. Because when we press in to that connection with each other, we will find Jesus again. Now, you may be here this morning and you're in a great place. You've had a great week, you've had a great month, you've had a great year. You know exactly what you stand for, you know exactly where you're going, everything is going well. So what I've just said, take and store away, because if ever that changes, you might need it. But I guarantee you there are people around you, some of them in this room. You will have colleagues and neighbours who feel lost, who are at sea, who need to get back on track. And what I've shared is how they can get back on track. And you might be here this morning and you might think, my goodness, he wrote this just for me. This is exactly everything that I've been thinking about. This is what I needed to hear. And if that's you, what you need to know is that that call that Jesus gave you, however long ago it was, years, months, many years ago, it still stands. And all those things, those moments in your life where he's been close to you, they still stand. And what you need to know is he wants you to come into fellowship with him. He wants to connect with you. And if you're here this morning and you had no idea that you could have a real life relationship with Jesus, that you could live in fellowship with him, if that's news to you, then you won't have those anchor points to go back to. But today could be that first encounter with Jesus. Today could become that anchor moment for you that you will come back to in years past. Because you could meet Jesus today. We could introduce you to him. And he is reaching out to those who are lost. Because he wants you to be found, and he wants to put you in a family. He wants you to be part of a body so that you don't live disjointed and disconnected. That's his heart for you. And that's why he met his disciples. That's why he was out on the beach that morning. He was looking for them. He was probably waiting for the boat to get close enough to the shore so that they could hear his voice. And when they were close enough, then he started to call out to them. Everything he did that morning was, let's reconnect. Let's get back on track. Let's do this together. Let me help you through this. And what a wonderful, wonderful Saviour we have. That he would go out of his way to find those that are feeling overwhelmed and to help them.